This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. It's the show ostensibly about sports, started during a global sports shutdown. My name is Geoff Brault. I'm joined by Dr. Keith Strudler, the director of the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. Shout out to our producer, Mike Wallace. He's the reason we look so pretty here on the For the Fans Network, or we sound so good on your favorite podcast listening spot. Keith, here's what we're going to talk about on this program before we get into the most important issue in society right off the top. Later on this program, we're going to talk about college football returning. We're going to talk about whether there'll be even more college football coming in the near future, meaning will the Big Ten change course and play some college football? Will fall sports that have been canceled return in the spring? What might that look like? How might they play for championships? And then we'll talk about quarterbacking in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles did something very interesting with the quarterback position, and there is some drama in the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback room that we will have to get into. But first, I think most experts agree that the most pressing and important issue in society is Sportish versus the robots. And, well, the robots may have won the last round in the fight. I don't believe they have won the war, but if last week was a battle, Keith, they would have won it. Do you want to update the folks on just exactly who our robot enemies are, why they must be vanquished, and quite frankly, why they got the upper hand on us last week?
Yeah, they did. They took a big step forward and an unexpected step forward. I thought we had hit some form of détente, and clearly that was not the case. And if this were the Star Wars saga, last week was definitely The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
So as we discussed quite a bit, and is in many ways the genesis of the show, sports very much transcends sport itself and into larger social issues. This is a matter of man versus machine right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So last week I believe we put together our best program to date. I think the show we did, of course, until this week, of course, but last week I do believe, as you like to say every week on Twitter, that was absolutely our best episode. It was flawless. You know, great guest, great storyline, great comedy at the end. It was a great piece of television. Clearly, our robots were on to us. They knew that. Now, early on in the program, you may have realized not only were they not running commercials and just robots, they were preceding the robots with about 45 seconds to a minute of complete darkness. I don't know if you noticed that. You may, if you were paying attention, that's what happened. For the
Stuck out a bit.
Yep. For the 5 or 6 of you that kept going, or that were incapacitated to the point that you could not change the channel. For those of you, you got through a great interview with Dave Zirin, right? And although the end of that did get cut off, regardless, you got that into what we thought was some of our finest bit of comedy and analysis of play-by-play commentating when I reenacted the Mike Breen famous double bang call, right? Yep. And I did it twice. Yep. You got to watch the first of those, but you didn't get to watch the payoff. Why? Yeah. Because at that moment, the robot commercial came on. Now, we're used to that. We're used to the robot commercials just interrupting the program at seemingly the most inopportune times. These robots just cut into the middle of a sentence. And so I figured, all right, for the three of you that are now still paying attention, you'll get to come back and see the double bang a second time and laugh right along with us. Unfortunately, something happened in the robot commercial. One of two robot commercials, I believe, and this was the gambling robots, which seem to have won the war of the robots internally. I don't see the archery robots anymore. I just see the gambling robots. The robots then that commercial interlude got caught on a loop. Yeah. That loop seemed to run, because I did check at one something. It seemed to have run for about 30 minutes. The robots. So if you just kept hoping it might come back, you were tortured Absolutely tortured. They ran that till about 1:15 a.m., at which point they returned to probably pool. That's what happened last night.
It was
I
a
don't know what to
veritable Groundhog's Day of robots playing poker. And if you aren't familiar with who the robots are, our podcast, if you're listening, debuts on Wednesday at midnight on For the Fans Network, the hottest up and coming sports network in America. And that network has chosen as its mascots, as its representatives, NBC's got the peacock. For the Fans has the robots. It's got a stable of robots. It's not just one. Their numbers seem to grow every week. And there are, when there's a commercial break and it is not sold to a sponsor, and shockingly, apparently none of ours are, your name here, good space
that's
still
one
available.
way to get rid of the robots. Maybe if you buy some commercials, that's one way. What if we bought our own commercial time just to get, we just ran ads for Sportish.
But what if we did it as robots? And that was how we fired back at the robots, was by the humans becoming the robots, the same way the robots are trying to become the humans.
Yeah. The problem is, I mean,
It's like a Christopher Nolan film.
We could buy the commercials and run commercials then, run as robots commercials for Sportish. The problem would be knowing, I mean, I don't want to take anyone too into the weeds. As our contract works, we'd only be getting a percentage back of what we spent.
That's true. But, I mean, look, sometimes you got to spend money to make money.
That's true.
And I do think more important than the money is the principle, right? I mean, you can't put a price on principles.
Always.
And the robots took from you, the viewing public, the ability to enjoy what we believe was our magnum opus to date, was debating the greatest calls that Mike Breen has ever made and Keith Strudler having to reenact. Because, again, we don't have the rights. We cannot play for you these calls. We cannot show you the video of them. We cannot let you hear the audio of them. So Keith reenacted them for you. And we thought that everyone out there was really going to enjoy that. And I think the robots sensed how excited we were to put that piece of art out into the world. And they stole that joy, not just from us, but from you. So I hope, if nothing else, if you were on the fence about which side you were on in Sportish versus the robots, I hope you've come on over to the human side, because we need you. We need you. This is a formidable opponent that we are up against. Clearly, they cannot be vanquished by witty quips and passive-aggressive comments alone. And we're going to need help. We're going to need you to tweet at us at SportishPod. You see our handles on the bottom there. We're going to need you to let us know how we can once and for all overcome this foe with whom we are locked in a titanic struggle.
Wouldn't it be, first of all, is it too much to say that they perhaps should also tweet at For the Fans Network? I think that's For the Fans HQ, and say, maybe something like #Sportish, not robots, something like that.
Hashtag humans first.
That's fine. Humans first.
Yep.
So tweet at For the Fans. This is where it all starts to unravel, by the way.
Yeah. Also, tag former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang in this. I feel like he foretold of this. He was out in front of this, and I do feel like he would be a great general in this fight for us.
To be fair, if they just started paying me that universal salary, this whole thing could go away. So I'm fine. The robots want to do the whole show, and they just pay me to sit back and do nothing. I think we could all solve this. How great would it be if the next skit was the robots doing the Mike Breen double bang?
Well, that's sort of the joke we talked about a couple weeks ago, is what if the robots started doing imitations of us? And I'm very worried it's coming. I mean, look, we are poking the bear right now. I fully recognize that. I mean, there's a chance that you're not seeing this, and there's definitely a chance that you're not going to see the real program that we're about to do in a minute here. But, I think we're taking advantage of the one tool that we have in the box, and that is we have real intelligence and not artificial intelligence.
I thought you were going to say that the tool we have is this airs at midnight, and everyone from network has probably gone to bed. So they're not going to yet get.
That is a second great advantage that we have. But we have agency to be able to respond to things in real time, whereas the robots do not. And that's all we got. is that ability, because they clearly have every other advantage over us. And
This is a real fight.
if you want to support the Rebel, we are the Rebel Alliance. We are the insurgency.
This is a fight I never expected to have. I knew we'd be up against it when we put this show together. I knew this was a ragtag operation that was, with duct tape and a hope and a prayer was going to make it to the top. I didn't expect us to also have to fight against animated robots from our own network. This is a twist I was not expecting to have. But game on, it will make us tougher in the long run. Look, I think. Ask Dunkin' Donuts about what happens when you get into a fight with Sportish. Ask them.
They're doing fine. Dunkin' Donuts doing fine. That is the last great behemoth that we railed against when we had an old radio show a couple of years ago, and I think they came through just fine.
They did. They actually seemed to have done just fine. Not only that, they didn't change the price of their donuts either. So I mean, really, that was a year of our life wasted.
If our robot overlords allow, let's get into our program.
One quick thing.
Okay.
If you did miss this, you can now still go back and watch the old episode on demand at For the Fans Next. So that's still happening. As far as I know, that's still happening.
Yeah, ftfnext.com. You can watch the video archives, and obviously you can hear the audio archives anytime. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you want your podcasts. Sportish is there. 5-star review. We'll take them. Ratings, reviews rather. We will take those too. It helps us out. It makes us feel good. And again, it's humankind bonding together to rage against the machine. All right, college football. It started, maybe not in earnest, but it got underway last weekend and really gets going when some ranked teams play this upcoming Saturday. Keith, it looked weird and it felt weird. I didn't watch a lot of it, but what I did see was pretty strange. How did you feel?
I felt guilty because I did watch. And there is this kind of disconnect because on the one hand, it's not normal. And on the other hand, it is very Pavlovian. When I see 18 to 23-year-olds putting on pads and throwing pigskin, I instinctively want to watch. And I think we are all craving this pastime that comes along with fall. I mean, it just feels it's that time of the year. Like it's Saturday afternoon. It feels like kids are going back to school in some places. It just feels like that's what you're supposed to do. So I did watch. It did feel a little weird. Of course, they're using all sorts of production techniques to make it happen. It's just, some of the shots, it's the shots on the sideline that kind of throw you off a little bit when you see guys wearing masks, right? That's what tends to kind of, throw you off your game. And then you go on ESPN or any of the websites and you see teams that are not playing because they've withdrawn, So that's the other thing. You're like, well, who's playing this week? I don't know. We don't know until literally the week before. And so there's such uncertainty. And I guess the other thing that feels a little weird is, that in the end, these games lack, one of the things that makes college football great is that essentially every game is really important. That's kind of that's why we don't have a huge playoff system, in the championship division. It's every game is supposed to matter a lot, whether it's for a conference championship, whether it's for playoff consideration, whether it's for a bowl game. Right now, we don't know if they're going to play next week. It's very hard to be like, well, if Army doesn't beat Middle Tennessee State, what's going to happen? I don't know that Army's going to play next week. So it does feel a little bit weird. And, you do feel a little, I don't say guilty, but you do recognize more so than usual. Because usually when you watch college football, you recognize that young athletes are taking, in some cases, undue risk for relatively small compensation, right? Scholarships and so forth. So we always have had to reconcile and kind of deal with that. And there's a certain amount of dissonance you have to be a college football fan. It feels a little bit worse when you're like, well, they may also get a deadly illness and the rest of their campus is unable to go to classes, but they're practicing. So it does feel a little weird. That doesn't mean I'm not watching though.
The two things that struck me as the most strange, the crowd shots. And I'm not talking about the empty crowd shots. I'm talking about the full, no social distancing, no masks on crowd shots.
Yeah.
That was the number one thing that I looked at and I was like, why is this happening? I mean, I understand in some places you get, a 70,000 seat stadium and you can socially distance 12,000 people in there. Sure. The game I was watching was Southern Miss. They do not have a stadium that large. And they do not appear to have any sort of policy about how many people can sit together, whether those people need to be wearing masks. I mean, they had a student section that looked, I'm guessing, the way it would have looked in the before times. And that, to me, if you're going to talk about safety is paramount and all of these things and these protocols and then that's the image that you're putting out on national television, it seems like those are the types of images that make people think that, one, the virus isn't an issue, and two, we don't need to do anything or be proactive in trying to beat it. Like, we're just living in this world that we're living in and everything's fine. And that is not an image that I'm a fan of. And I don't think anyone should be a fan of that image, even if you're of the belief that college football is safe to be played and should be being played.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Since I'm so desperate for football, I started watching high school football, which has been on a fair it's some pretty good football. I mean, it's some good football. So I've been watching a decent amount of high school football. And high school football, not a lot of 70,000 seat stadiums, right? And so you've got bleachers that are seating 5,000 to 8,000 people. And I'll tell you, they're relatively close together, and the masks seem to come off pretty quickly. And it's primarily, I feel like, from Tennessee, Texas, the traditional kind of places you would expect to see high school football on national television. But you're right. You watch it and you start to wonder, like, is that a different America? Like, sometimes I watch it and I'll turn on something like high school football and I'm like, oh, this must be a replay from last year, because that seems to be happening a lot where you're watching a replay. So yeah, in some ways it has just kind of highlighted and exacerbated the divide that we seem to have right now. But all of that said, I will say that is probably adding even more pressure to the schools who have chosen not to play. And I'm sure, as we're going to get into, there are a lot of college presidents and conference commissioners who are now feeling a ton of heat when people are watching other universities play and say, why can't we do that?
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten, which we're going to get into in a second, might actually be reversing course and playing in October. I do want to touch on the second thing that I found weird, and that was the handheld whistles that the referees were using, which to me just underscored the arbitrary safety lines that we have decided to draw to bring football back. 22 men from different parts of the country are perfectly fine to line up 3 feet away from each other for 3 hours. However, the safety line that needs to be drawn to ensure that the competition can happen safely is that the referees can't blow a whistle and instead have to push a button in a handheld Jeopardy ring-in device, because that is what could bring the whole house of cards down. Like, we are just out here drawing arbitrary lines for health and safety.
Maybe that's a better whistle. Maybe we never should have been. I mean, the whistle, let's be clear. The whistle probably falls second to only the recorder, the recorder that you play, the little flute, in terms of the ability to grow, beyond human bacteria, right? I mean, the inside of a whistle is clearly, so I'm not so sure we're just saving them potentially from COVID. We may be saving them from staph. We may be saving them from all sorts of other fungi that grow on the inside of the whistle. Maybe, when we say that COVID's not really creating innovation, it's just exacerbating change, right? These are things. Maybe the whistle's time has come. Maybe, but you're right. It does seem as though, because if you watch, like, let's say you watch the NBA, which I watch quite a bit of, right? And I was watching with my wife, and she's like, why is there plexiglass up when they're all standing in front of the plexiglass? Right. Seems to be the only guy that understands, like, I don't want Van Gundy's, like, he's stepping back. Van Gundy is basically licking the camera at this point, right? So why is there, because it's a good point. And then sometimes during the interviews, they're all in there all together and they're all in the bubble. And then all of a sudden someone puts on a mask. She's like, why are they putting on a mask now? And I'm like, well, I that's a great question. And I think it's for appearance's sakes, right?
It's for optics. It's the same reason why Southern Miss needs to get their house in order with the crowd shots. It's because of the optics. Like, you can't both do it and have bad if you're going to do it, you have to do it and act responsibly. Even if you're not acting responsibly, you have to look like you're acting responsibly. Just fake it. Just fake it if you have to. The one thing you can't do is not fake it. You can't say the quiet part loud.
That's like when you see pictures of people on websites for it, and they have the masks down below here.
Right.
I'm like, you can't do that. There's something you can have. You can have no mask because you show that they're distance. You can have the mask right. You can't have the mask on wrong. Yep. And some of these organizations, I like what the Tour de France is. And by the way, Tour de France is happening. I'm so happy. I never knew how happy I could be. How happy I could be when the Tour de France and the U.S. Open are happening at the same time. I didn't realize I could have that level of joy in my life. And so the Tour de France is happening. The deal with the Tour de France, though, if 2 people from a team test positive, the entire team is out. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you could have a guy in your team who is about to win the Tour, and you could have a driver and someone else on the team that say, I really hate that guy. Let's go out. Let's get ourselves some COVID and get this guy. I mean,
yeah, you think that's how it works?
I'm just saying, they're literally like that. You want to talk about peer pressure? No one's messing around. There is no one going out to the, like in Atlanta, going out to the strip club to get some wings, because they are like literally everyone that tests positive, it derails the entire team. It's fascinating. So they really have to stick to it together. That is a moving bubble. The Tour de France is a cycling bubble. It's amazing.
That was how the basketball tournament, that's how TBT worked in their bubble. If one person on one team tested positive, the whole team out, and they replaced it with a new team.
That's not fair, though. It's not fair. I mean, what if you're about to win the Tour? What if you're about to win the Tour? You're 2 stages away from that, and it's
a tough break. I mean, you brought up the U.S. Open. The number 1 doubles team on the women's side got excluded for essentially the same thing. Someone was around someone who tested positive, and so they had to be removed. This is the hoops. These are the hoops that must be jumped through to have sports happening right now.
Woo! Are we talking? Is this? I haven't looked at the rundown because we never write down. I'm sure you write down the rundown.
I wrote it down.
Are we talking about the U.S. Open?
Maybe if we get to it. Do you want to?
It's a great story. It's quite a story.
You know,
I know we're on football. I know we're still on football.
The only story that I think there is that Novak Djokovic kind of sucks. Like he's this year has proven that he's kind of a garbage human. Like,
not true. That's not true.
It's absolutely true. Look at what happened in the last 4 months. Comes out as an anti-vaxxer. Holds a tennis tournament in Serbia.
Sure. Not a great idea.
With no mask and social distancing. They all go out to a bar and their cell phone video, and then all of them test positive for the virus. And then now hits a poor old lady in the throat at the U.S. Open.
You're cherry picking.
I'm cherry picking the major incidents that made the news media from the last 5 months. Yeah.
No, but what's amazing? So I mean, I don't know if you watched that sequence that got Novak kicked out of the U.S. Open, which, by the way, he's literally the only player of note. No offense to everyone else who's playing. Yes. Everyone else is either lost or faked an injury and just decided not to come, right?
Yeah.
So this is it. This is his to lose. And this is the only reason people are watching right now on the men's side, right? And so and we're watching Serena. We watched the Sloane Stephens, Serena Williams match. That was great. Novak is pretty much the only show in town. And he was a little bit upset. I mean, this is what happens when you play golf. How often do you get angry? You throw something, you get a little upset. He literally flicked the ball back, and he happened to, of all places, it happens to I mean, I'm not laughing on it because she's fine, but it literally hit her in the throat like he was trying to kill her. I mean,
and I will say,
normally that would have bounced off a shoulder. You wouldn't even notice. It hit her in the throat. She went down like a sack of potatoes. Like
there are European soccer players that watched her go down and were like, lady, you're milking it. But that said, you can't do that. Like, there's a difference between
it's a giant court. What are the odds of her hitting it? It's like a bullseye.
You talk about golf.
You got 2 shots. You got 2 shots on most people. You got a throat and a groin, and that's it.
Look, you bring up golf. Have I ever gotten mad?
By the way,
have I ever tossed a club?
The only better shot would have been if it were a male ball boy and hit him right in the groin. That's the only better money shot than right in the throat. But how many times? First of all, do you think that's a good rule that if you hit a ball and it hits someone, if he had done that and it had missed her, he'd be winning the tournament right now.
Yeah, but that's not the rule. The rule is if you hit someone and you hurt them. Because it happened a couple weeks or a couple months ago or whatever, where somebody hit a cameraman and the cameraman was like, nope, glancing blow, I'm fine. And then you don't get disqualified. The rule is if you hurt the person. And that's basically why they had to kick him out and why the discussion was so long. Because it was, hey, the fact that we have to give this woman medical attention and take her out of the rotation of judging, that's why we have no choice but to disqualify you. So do I think that's a good rule? Do I think if you hurt an umpire, you have to be disqualified? I do think that. I do think that's a fair rule.
All right. What if you're a football game and the running back just happens to bowl over the official, which happens? Officials get knocked out of games all the time. Should they be removed from the game?
If he hit him on purpose.
He didn't. Novak didn't. Look, I am not. You're putting me in the position of having to defend the indefensible, which I know is what you're trying to do here. But again, if he had hit her, what if he hit her in the shoulder and she was like, "Oh my God, my shoulder's killing me now"? Would that have warranted?
Possibly, by the letter of the law, they could have.
But I mean, you understand how it seems as though we're in this highly subjective area. Again, it seems very unfortunate. It does.
Have you read the rule? It's not subjective at all.
You just read it to me, so now I don't have to.
The rule is cut and dry. If you hurt someone, you have to be defaulted. Like, it's right there in the rules. But if you hurt them.
But hurt is dependent. Again, I'm defending a guy who... That's now a string of you know what? They should have kicked him out for being an anti-vaxxer. That's where I mean, that's fine.
Easy way to solve this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take Novak Djokovic because he's still in New York and he's not doing anything right now. We're going to stand him 15 feet or so away from you. We're going to stand you up against a wall and he's going to hit you in the throat with a tennis ball. and then you're gonna tell me whether he should have been disqualified or not.
Wait, if I do that, can he go back and play? That's like in 22 Jump Street where he gets the taser.
I don't remember that. See, it's a great movie.
I feel like there was a taser scene in both 21 and 22 Jump Street. I feel like that was just a thing. Like where who are the actors? Not Channing Tatum.
Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum.
I feel like he gets tased twice. I feel like that's just a thing. So,
are you good with the US Open, or
I am. I'm just. Yes, he did what he did was so wrong. And tennis has rules of decorum, but it's not kind of like golf. Like golf has these arbitrary rules where people get kicked out of tournaments because he was supposed to tie his shoe first on the left side, then the right side, and he didn't do that. So now it's a gentleman's game, and he has to withdraw from the tournament. I feel like there's everything with scorecards in golf. When you fill your scorecard,
well, that's the stupid one. Yeah, you keep your own score. That's the stupid one. You sign an incorrect scorecard. Like, yes. It's a professional golf event. Someone can keep score for you. Like we're all watching.
So I'm just saying there are. I do understand, and I understand that Novak now has a reputation issue to deal with. The good thing for him is he's kind of the only game going right in men's professional tennis, and so he'll survive. But I do understand he probably has some work to do.
Upon his exit, no player left in the men's draw has ever won a Grand Slam. So whoever wins the U.S. Open is going to be a first-time winner of a Grand Slam.
Did you see? I read the interview of the guy he was playing against. They're like, "Do you think he should have been kicked out?" He's like, Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
yeah. He's like, that is the way the rule is written. Yeah. My second favorite thing that happened after the Novak Djokovic incident is that now Nick Kyrgios, who is sort of universally considered the bad boy of tennis, just crushing Novak Djokovic and doing it by like, if I hit someone in the throat with a tennis ball, what would happen to me? And like all of his fans are replying with like, you'd be in prison.
He is the bad boy of tennis. He took the mantle of, he's like the John McEnroe without the wins. So he very much is the bad boy.
We're all over the place this episode, but I think jumping back to college football, Big Ten getting a lot of pressure from President Trump and from other people in high offices that want them to play. Do you think they're going to change course and play? There have been rumblings that maybe late October there will be some Big Ten football.
I do think the Big Ten's going to play. I think it's more. Look, we were wrong on this before. We said the college football wasn't going to happen. So whatever we say is pretty much worthless. You take your advice from the robots from now on. But I do think they're going to play. I think when, president of Ohio State came out and said, she was interested in there's been some new data. That's data I'm very unaware of, but I think that new data is other teams are playing. And I think that becomes, they are going to probably use as a crutch some of the protocols that the other power conferences are using to try to make these games happen and say, well, we didn't know that we were going to be able to do this. This testing is working. Perhaps if they get that $5, saliva test that they can use, it might make things a little bit easier for them, particularly since a lot of these campuses are going to be cleared out anyway. They could just go ahead and bubble the whole thing. It's a lot easier to keep 100 guys secure in a university that seats 50,000, you could find space for them to socially distance. So I do think they're going to do it. I don't think it has anything to do with political pressure from the president. I think it has to do with the pressure from their alumni and their donors and their students. And in some cases, the athletes and their families as well, who rightly or wrongly, we talk a lot about the advocacy that happens on the other side where players are demanding, better testing and to be paid, and some of the unionization efforts, particularly that were coming out of the Pac-12 and in some cases the Big Ten. The other side of it is there are a ton of athletes, not a ton, but there seem to be several athletes or many athletes from conferences, major conferences that are not playing, that are very interested or worried that their draft status might go down or that they are going to lose opportunities that similar athletes from other conferences will have.
The other big college sports decision that's coming down the pipe is the NCAA is going to have to decide whether fall sports that aren't playing in the fall are going to play in the spring. And that decision is going to have to be made relatively soon. And with that decision will have to be, what do NCAA championships look like? And I am certain that the fight that is coming is that the NCAA will want to limit the size of their tournaments. And I am including the March Madness basketball tournament in this. And the way they want to limit the size of their tournaments is by cutting automatic qualifiers. And what an automatic qualifier is if you win your conference, you're automatically in the championship. So that's how, these small schools get into the NCAA tournament. The power conferences have long wanted AQs.
Get them out.
Off the table. Right.
They and Jay Billis, get them out.
Yep. Small.
And the argument is that they are, generally speaking, if it were by who's the best 64 or 32 or whatever number of teams make the tournament, those teams would not make the tournament. It very rarely would a team from a small conference, because you often are looking at universities that spend between $60 and $150 million a year on athletics versus schools that spend between 7 and 20. So generally speaking, it's in no way a fair fight. That's correct.
However, getting into NCAA tournaments is why I'm going to call it 75%, and that might be low, of athletes in college athletics play their sport, right? Yeah. Their championship is getting there and getting a chance to take on those teams that spend $75 to $100 million a year on athletics. It's also how many of these small conferences gain revenue, because as you advance in, say, March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament, you are earning money for your conference. Which means that if you have a team out of a small league that wins a game or wins 2 games or goes full George Mason, Butler, VCU, Loyola Marymount, Loyola Chicago, whichever one you want to pick, that's a massive windfall for a small league that gets distributed to all the other teams in your conference. If you eliminate automatic qualifiers, these conferences are going to be very, very strapped for cash. It could end up killing sports in some of these colleges. Athletes that are part of these programs and now can't go to a championship tournament, probably going to transfer, go somewhere where they can, if they're good enough. They're going to look at a place they can get in to compete for a national championship. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. They're probably not good at it. Most of the cases, they're there, though. I mean, in all fairness, they're good athletes. They're at those universities in some cases, in most cases, because they
that's true. No, I don't think that's true. I think the top guy on many, many, many teams that are below the Power Five can go just about anywhere they want to go.
I think you're right to a degree. I think there are a lot of athletes that need a year or two to kind of play their way into that level. And there are a lot of universities that at the mid-tier Power Five to lower tier Power Five that it's almost like picking up a community college recruit, a JUCO recruit, right? These are athletes that probably didn't shine in high school. They came, they played. So you're right. There would be the top 10% that could transfer over into a Power Five conference. That would probably hurt the JUCO transfers. Who knows? The rest of them, though, are stuck. I mean, the rest of the guys playing in, you name your league, the CAA, or that's actually a decent league, but you work your way down the NEC.
Mhm.
There's not a LIU Brooklyn, like those guys are not playing at Kentucky. This is not going to happen.
Well, they certainly aren't when the one guy on their team who could play at Kentucky is now playing at Kentucky. And that's the point. It totally changes college sports the way that 75% of the participants in it are used to participating in it. Changes their end goal, changes everything for fans. It changes everything for, it changes this is a massive, massive decision that's coming up. And, the NCAA, the Power Fives, they've wanted AQs cut for a while.
Yeah.
The smaller colleges are arguing, well, that's fine. If you're going to cut spots in the NCAA tournament for safety or whatever reason you feel like you need to cut them, why not cut at large bids?
Well, that's now you're kidding. They're not. So look, there's a bunch of layers to this, because on the one hand, it's truly a revenue question. So when you're talking about basketball, and when we're talking about college sports, leave football out of everything, because football has its own championships, and we're talking about basketball and all the other sports.
Correct.
Men's basketball primarily, because that's where the money really is. So that is a revenue question in some cases. If you don't allow the basically the bottom 18 or so conferences entree into the 18 to 20 conferences entree into the NCAA tournament, they won't cease to be, but that money gets spread over X number of years, 6 years, to all the teams in the conference. It will compromise everything that they do. And it will change the nature of the number of sports they're able to field, what they're able to pay a basketball coach. It will, in essence, almost turn them into a Division III program, right?
I disagree slightly. I think it will drastically change the landscape. If you think a lot of sports have gone club, have become club sports because of the pandemic, because of budgetary concerns raised because of COVID, wait till you see how many sports go club when there's no national championship that pays out, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars if you get into it.
And there's also, part of the appeal of being a Division I university like that is that you have the opportunity to play against an Ohio State. Once that opportunity is largely taken away from you, you really do need to ask yourself, why are we giving away so many scholarships, right? It does, look, if this plays out to the conclusion that you're kind of taking it to, which I think is a stretch at this point, right? This may be a 1 year, let's figure it out, and they could still do some kind of revenue share to make it work, right? They might be able to say, look, we can only fit 16 teams in a bubble right now. That's all we're going to do. And if a Gonzaga can play their way in, right? But everyone else, they're going to have to sit out. We'll spread the money out, and it's just going to suck. All right. That's different than changing the entire nature of the NCAA tournament, which is we're getting rid of AQs. If they determine this is a 1 year hiatus, we'll distribute some money. I understand once you go down that road.
Exactly.
When people are like, hey, that tournament was really good. I don't think two things. I don't think people will think it's really good. I think the NCAA tournament, I don't believe that in football. I believe in football. We want to see Florida play Texas. We want to see Alabama and Ohio State. I think in basketball, and I did go back and listen to Gus Johnson's call, the slipper still fits. It's not as good as Bang Bang, but it is spectacular. It's a great call. And if it weren't Florida on the losing end of that, I'd like it even more. I do think that part of why we watch the NCAA tournament is for that first week where we can see a few upsets. We want to see the heavyweights play in the finals, right? But we want to see North Carolina and Kentucky in the finals. But we definitely want to see George Mason play its way into the Sweet 16. We love that. And so I don't think in the end of the day, this is actually a good business decision for the NCAA. Now, let me just take one of it. Let's look at some of these other sports. There's some real questions that get raised in some of the other sports where automatic qualifiers play their way into a tournament. And you could take a bunch of sports like a baseball. Baseball's a kind of an anomaly, but there are a bunch of sports where you have a small conference. Maybe lacrosse becomes in some ways a decent example. There are examples when teams that are automatic qualifiers play their way into the NCAA tournament. They are so far below the talent level. I mean, and so part of me says, and I don't think that's as true in basketball. I think the delta is close enough that the best team from these small conferences can play competitively in most cases with even the 116. It's a rough game, but we've seen they can largely be competitive. I'm telling
and win.
You,
we've seen they can win.
They won.
Shout out UMBC. and the Harvard women on the women's side. It's happened twice.
Yes. I don't think that's in some of these other sports. You have some lacrosse games where it's like 30-3. Like there's some real blowouts, and not every sport. Look, cross country doesn't do it that way. Cross country, you have to go through a regional meet and you have to place in the top 2 or 3. So I don't care what conference you're in. You have to win your way into the national meet. So if you want to run at nationals, you have to win your way by competing against really good schools. That's a little different. So in some sports, honestly, and not that's all about me, but when I ran for Cornell, the most important meet wasn't whether you got into nationals or not. It wasn't regionals. The most important meet was conference. It was HEPs. And the thing I don't mind, I agree, they got to be able to play it. For basketball, taking away March Madness is the death in many ways of all college sports as we know it, and they're going to have to redo everything. All right, and then we're going to have the Power 5 or 7 or 8 conferences, and then we'll have Division 2, and Division 2 will become Division 3, or the whole thing will reform, because a lot of Division 1 schools are only giving scholarships out right now so they can stay in that top division. If you take Siena and take them out of the NCAA tournament, they're not going to go to Division 2 and give scholarships. They're going to join Ithaca College in Division 3, and that's fine. Right? There's a whole new order. But the only thing I would say for some of the other sports, I don't mind if we start to recognize that in the end of the day, you should be winning, trying to compete against your conference. You shouldn't, if you play for a very small conference, it shouldn't be whether you can get to a national tournament and lose by 300% or 400% to a far superior franchise. So
disagree. You win your conference, you should get the chance to play for a national championship. And if you lose 30-3, so be it. That's your level. You got a chance to get in there and you got a chance to play for it. I don't think there's any athlete who's ever been in the wrong side of the 30-3 defeat who was like, well, I wish we didn't even get the chance.
Woo!
All right, we're almost out of time, but I want to get into the NFL and talk about some things that have happened at the quarterback position over the last week. All in the state of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Eagles have signed a quarantine quarterback. 41-year-old Josh McCown is on the Eagles practice squad. He becomes the oldest player in league history to make a practice squad. He's getting $12,000 a week to live with his family in Texas, attend some meetings on Zoom, and basically stay ready with a playbook he already knows because Josh McCown was on the Eagles as a backup quarterback last year. Keith, there's one thing we love on this program. It's getting paid a lot of money to do very little. And Josh McCown has a pretty sweet finesse going here as the quarantine quarterback.
So I was unaware that this was happening. And you probably don't know my history with Josh McCown.
No, I don't.
So I saw Josh McCown at a charity event a couple of years ago when he was with the Jets. And I was like, well, that's a good looking guy. Like that guy's got the whole package. He dressed really well, really slim shirt. Like I was like, I'd like to have a bromance with that guy. Like he was going to be my next guy, my next Jack Ford type. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and that became kind of a running thing, like me and just like, if you ask Kelly Whiteside, cause she was all like, that's a thing. I'm a huge fan of his and the pride and joy of Sam Houston State University. So I feel really good about knowing that. I feel like I've always wanted to be close. I guess we're going on a tangent here. This is more about my infatuation with him as a human being, as opposed to whether or not this is a good thing. So yeah, good for him. Like, I mean, 41 years old. He's not going to play. He's a very smart guy. Seems like he's smart. Kind of a. It seemed like he was a coach in waiting kind of guy. And so now he's
that's actually what they're saying. Why he'd be interested in a role like this is it essentially sets him up to one day be a coach. Yeah.
Would you rather? All right. And I think I know your answer here. Mm-hmm. Would you rather same salary be the quarterback, the starting quarterback, or the on the bench quarterback? Same salary, same career length. And
I'm me.
Well, I mean, you have a real body. Like you're not just like
like I'm physically capable of being in the NFL. Like I'm not at risk.
You're not like when you take off your shirt in the locker room, they're like, oh, I think we have a medical issue.
I'd rather be the starting quarter. I'd rather be the starting quarterback.
Okay. So you'd rather get the glory.
Yes.
Okay. What if it's, you get more money for being on the bench, 15% more money?
I'd rather be on the bench.
Where's the dividing line? Where does that cross over? The $1 more?
$1 more.
So you want glory as long as it doesn't cost you anything.
Correct. Because what truly matters is the money.
Okay. All right. So he's playing. He's not going to play quarterback, and he's going to. Is there any chance he gets in on the field? Any chance?
Sure. If Carson Wentz, Nate Sudfeld, and Jalen Hurts all get hurt.
That's a lot.
But the real reason they're doing this is if there's a COVID outbreak in the quarterback room. Yeah.
Are they not allowed to ever see each other? Is that the deal? Like,
no, he stays in Texas. He stays far away from the team.
I wasn't really listening that much.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But you know what? I'll get you with this because here's the other bit of Pennsylvania quarterback drama.
That's a great idea. So he's a work from home quarterback. He's a work from home quarterback. Does he zoom into everything? Does he zoom into games?
In Pittsburgh, they may be looking for some social distance between their quarterbacks. Their number 2 quarterback, Mason Rudolph, is dating Bachelor alum Hannah Ann Sluss. All right, keep that in mind. Number 2 quarterback, dating a girl from The Bachelor. Number 3 quarterback, they just signed Josh Dobbs. 2 months before Hannah Ann and Mason Rudolph started dating, guess who Hannah Ann was dating? That's correct. Number 3 quarterback, Josh Dobbs. Keith, how uncomfortable are those meetings going to be?
Wow. I mean, now, here's what's going to be suspect. If they both contract COVID at the same time, despite not seeing each other. I don't know. That's weird. It's very uncomfortable. How did the first relationship break up? Because that makes a big difference. Because
I don't know. I will say this. The rumor is that the relationship with the number 3 quarterback, Josh Dobbs, started in March, and the relationship with the number 2 quarterback, Mason Rudolph, started in May. So not a lot of distance in between those two entanglements.
No, she got over it quickly.
It appears that way. Yeah. Now,
I always find that
at the time, Josh Dobbs played for the Jaguars. Mason Rudolph was still with the Steelers, but then the Steelers switched out their number 3 quarterback, and now they're in the same room.
But I also feel like these relationships are very kind of orchestrated. They're all living in different cities anyway. It's almost just like talk about like a work from home. This is like a work from home relationship. I don't feel like these are real relationships. This is a reality TV. I don't know. I don't think
Hannah Ann's got so much going on in her life she can't be in Pittsburgh.
I'm just saying I feel like these are relationships that are concocted by PR agents, and they slot them in, then they move them around. I don't know, but it is uncomfortable.
So what you're saying is we need better PR people.
So we can date the same person. There's one person in my house. I don't actually know if she'd mind that, but it would be an issue.
It would make for a good episode, and maybe we'll get into that next week because we're out of time on this one. Thanks to Mike Wallace, my partner, Dr. Keith Strudler. I'm Geoff Brault. We'll see you on the next edition of Sportish. See you.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.